Democratic and Republican parties are missing in action. The committee facilitates debate as the first step in making our elected representatives accountable and faithful to the Constitution. Tonight, we're going to discuss the surveillance state. The surveillance state is part of the warfare state. We're going to discuss the connection between what our government is doing abroad and what our government is doing here to our civil liberties. The Committee for the Republic was born out of a painful recognition that something had gone terribly wrong when our two political parties no longer understand that the strength of our nation comes from our commitment to a constitutional form of government. The Constitution is flouted as regularly as the rising and setting of the sun. The Constitution is better than all the alternatives ever conceived or attempted. Power cannot be exercised legitimately unless the Constitution is honored. War is legitimate only if Congress declares war. Killings and detentions are illegitimate without due process of law. So surveillance is illegitimate unless Fourth Amendment safeguards are respected. If our Fourth Amendment rights are violated, our First Amendment rights are collateral damage. Tonight we're going to hear from the Chief Chronicler of the National Security Agency. James Bamford has spent the last 3 decades as a journalist, investigative reporter, and best-selling author on the NSA. In his groundbreaking book, Puzzle Palace, Jim exposed the Orwellian power of Big Brother. In Body of Secrets and then in Shadow Factory, Jim went further into the details of the inner workings of this most secret of all agencies. I promise you, this will be an interesting evening. I ask you to join me in welcoming my good friend, fellow citizen, committee member Jim Bamford for his second appearance.
Really great event, but it's only the second greatest event I've had here. Right through those doors, I was married a few years ago, so this has to take second place for that. And among the people at my wedding, which I discovered later, was the major Russian spy, Bob Hansen, who I had known for years as one of my sources, and didn't realize what his avocation was. But it's really good to have you all here. I was very happy that the President decided to hold off on his announcement until tomorrow so he could hear what I had to say tonight. That was very nice of him. I don't think he's probably going to agree with most of what I have to say, but I'd be interested to hear what he has to say tomorrow. One of the things that's really fascinating is how many people actually know about NSA today. I mean, everybody here. When I first wrote The Puzzle Palace back in 1982, I was doing a book tour, and one of the people on the book tour, or at least in the limousine going to the studio, was Senator Bill Bradley from New Jersey. And he said, oh, what's your book about? And I said, it's about the NSA, the National Security Agency. And he said, what's that? So we got on the set, and he was there to talk about the economy. I was there to talk about NSA. And I just couldn't resist it when the host asked me, how secret is NSA? And I said, well, even Senator Bradley said he never heard of it. And he got really angry. He took a separate car back to the hotel. And then the next day, his aide called up and said, that was really below the belt to say that. And I said, no. Below the belt was saying he probably confused it with the NBA. So I heard he went on the Intelligence Committee, though, after our get-together. So he knew a lot more about NSA than I did after that. One other thing that was really funny when the book first came out was that the book was picked by Book of the Month Club. And so I got the New York Times Book Review, and on the back they have all these little pictures of these little books that make the little pictures of the books that make the Book of the Month Club. So I saw mine, the name was there, the Puzzle Palace, but the picture was different. It was a picture of a rocket taking up or something. And then we called up and they said, well, what was the idea of doing this? And they said, well, we thought you were talking about NASA. So they actually changed the cover of my book on the Book of the Month Club because they thought I made a mistake. But anyway, John wanted me to keep this fairly short because we got a lot of people with a lot of questions, and the questions are going to be far more interesting than the talk. So but I thought I'd run through a few interesting things here. First of all, I'm really happy to be in the Press Club. Press Club has been a member here for over 30 years now. My first slide. I was actually a member when they, actually not at the time, but later on. This was actually an all-men's place until 1971, I think it was. But the person up on the, up there that has a deck of cards or a hand of cards in front of him was an old-time Press Club member. He hang out here during the 1950s, and he became a really fascinating card shark. And he wrote a book called Education of a Poker Player, and that's we're still in the original building, so he may have been playing cards here. But before he became a card shark, he had another job, and that was being the founding father of the National Security Agency. The NSA actually got its start in that little apartment building there, July 1920. And Herbert Yardley was the chief of the Black Chamber, that's what it was called. And he lived on the top floor with his family, and the first floor was a phony company. It was a company that supposedly made commercial codes, but it was just a front. And the actual code breaking was done on the two middle floors. So as you can imagine, the NSA has grown a fair amount since those days. But what some of us, or at least some people have been saying right now, happened actually in 1929. And that was the Secretary of State came along, Secretary of State Simpson, and Yardley didn't want to tell him that there was a thing called the Black Chamber, even though his State Department was paying for it. Because he didn't know what his reaction would be, that there's a secret little office up in New York that is eavesdropping on communications. And then he did finally tell him, and Simpson was outraged, and he yelled, "Gentlemen, do not read each other's mail," and he immediately closed down the Black Chamber. Well, that put Yardley out of work. So then Yardley went from being the head of the Black Chamber, the head of the organization that was the first predecessor of the NSA, to becoming the basically the Edward Snowden of his day. Snowden, who today has become the object of, is he a hero or is he a traitor? And my answer to that is always, he's a very heroic whistleblower. There's no connection between Snowden and Trump. There's five. I know five. I've been writing about him. I had one of my weddings I mentioned. Edward Snowden is not selling secrets to the Russians. He didn't go there to sell secrets to the Russians. He went there because the U.S. canceled his passport halfway between Hong Kong and Ecuador. But way before there was a Edward Snowden, there was Herbert Yardley. And Herbert Yardley, after they closed the Black Chamber, he decided to write a book about it, which was the very first expose of American cryptologic community. And they weren't very happy, obviously, with what they were, when his book came out. And they tried putting him in jail, but they couldn't find a law. So they actually created a new part of the espionage law to prosecute him with. And a lot of that is what they're prosecuting, threatening to prosecute Snowden with right now. But ironically, the first head of the NSA became also the first whistleblower. Now this is something that I think Edward Snowden would be very interested in, because there's a history of this. There's a history, actually, which I'm going to show you in a little bit here, of at one point being a real big villain to the NSA, and the next minute being a hero to the NSA. So it took a while. It took almost 70 years, but they finally put Herbert Yardley in the Hall of Honor at NSA. So maybe there's still a chance for Ed Snowden at some point. But like I said, this isn't... Yardley's book was the very first book written basically on the organization of the cryptologic organization, predecessor to NSA. Then the next one to write was David Kahn, who wrote a book called The Codebreakers in 1967, which told a lot about NSA. It was the most biggest expose of NSA that had ever happened since Herbert Yardley. And the NSA went to a lot of trouble to try to get rid of the book. I mean, they even considered, this came out in the Senate Intelligence Committee report, surreptitious entry to his house to try to steal the manuscript, clandestine service applications, whatever that is, kidnapping, termination, whatever. And worst of all, they were going to plant some disparaging press reviews about his book. Which, as an author, you take every other option before that one. So, like Yardley, David Kahn was rehabilitated, and in 1995, they made him the first official scholar in residence at NSA. And then they took all his books, including the one that they were trying to ban, and they put it in the library. So, again, more hope for Ed Snowden here. Then, mine was the next one, the Puzzle Palace. And there they accused me of putting the country at risk. They threatened me twice with prosecution to give up trying to force me to give up documents, which I never gave up. Raided a library where I did the research, ripped a lot of stuff out of the library. They threatened several of my sources, including a former NSA director with prosecution and jail time and everything. They had a guy follow me. That's why I wore that. I wore a costume wherever I went. So they. Actually, that was a Halloween party at John Henry's house. But they did. They actually had somebody in every audience where I gave a talk from NSA taking notes, just in case I slipped up and said something they could put me in jail with. Then they put a whole file cabinet of papers together on me. And I FOIA'd them. I submitted a freedom of information request. And they said, "We don't have anything on you." And I said, "Well, that's impossible. I've been writing about you for 3 years. You've been after me for 3 years. And you don't have a single piece of paper." And then I saw on one paper, it said the word Esquire. I figured, that's my code name. So I sent a request for everything on the Esquire file, and I got a whole and I get rehabilitated too. So after about 20 years, the agency, yes, I just made that picture up there. Yes, they actually had a book signing for me at NSA, and they did have a line going out the door. And a lot of people were actually carrying the Puzzle Palace, which they were forbidden to carry even by before. And they invited me to speak to the National Cryptologic School, but I'm really recalcitrant, so I became a bad guy again. I wrote a really nasty book about NSA eavesdropping, so I'm no longer on their official tour list anymore. But anyway, so there is a possibility here that this could be reality. You know, you get General Alexander holding a sign up saying Snowden's a hero, or wearing a hero T-shirt. I mean, it's all possible. Who knows?